Hey, what's up? Welcome, everyone. Welcome. This is not your traditional webinar where you're just tuning in after lunch with videos off. The goal for this is a round table. We've got Aaron from Gumloop, so excited. So if you're here, turn your video on so we can get that to see if we're boring you, we're exciting you, see if you have a question. So turn videos on if you can. Goal for this is a round table. What's up, Daniel? Welcome back.
I
Hey,
feel
hey,
like we're going to
Anu, welcome, Derek.
have like a
And we're going to use the chat today. So Aaron's just going to riff. We've got a live demo for you all in QA. So just to make sure I know you guys know how to use the chat, just drop in the chat where you're calling in from. So you go to the bottom of Zoom, open up chat. Welcome, Anu, coming in from SF. Same with me. Daniel's in Kansas City. Love to see it. And so the goal for the chat for today, that'll be the main way we'll queue up questions. So as you have questions, just drop them in the chat and we'll curate them for Aaron. So really excited to welcome Aaron. Aaron is head of community at Gumloop and education, and he's well renowned in the automation community for his prior work, but we're here today to talk about Gumloop. We're gonna start with a 10-minute demo. So this isn't just a webinar where we're gonna talk slides. We're gonna talk product over product in live time. And so, Aaron, before we jump into the demo, anything you want to just share on your background or intro so people know?
Yeah, happy to. Well, Michael, really appreciate the invite. Yeah, super excited. I know it's intimidating to join a Zoom where two people have like studios, but we're super welcoming. Super excited to be here. So yeah, I just joined Gumloop about over like 2 months ago now. Before that, I was at Airtable and Webflow before that. So actually just moved to San Francisco. So new to the area. Just moved from New York, and Michael invited me here to kind of demo the product. Uh, Gumloop, just I'm not going to do a whole pitch, but Gumloop can do so many things. It's an AI automation platform, right? You're hearing a lot about agents. Gumloop is not quite an agent platform, but it can do agent-like things. But ultimately, any workflow where you need to include AI or would like to include AI, Gumloop can help you automate that. Um, and because it's so horizontal, I'm not a smart person. I don't know what you all do in your day to day. So please just like use the chat. If I'm building something, I'm going to be building live today. We have one specific node that Michael thought would be super interesting to you all, and I'm going to explain what nodes are in a moment, which is the AI web research. Uh, um, Everything we're going to do today is live. So yeah, let me know in the chat. Hey, can we do this? Can we change that? I want to build with you all. Thank you all for joining live. That means a lot to me and Michael. And the value you get is being able to ask questions and see how this maps to your workflow. Uh, um, but yeah, super excited. Michael, do you want to introduce the use case or should I?
I would say feel free to go for it. And I think assume people generally know what an AI automation workflow is, but
Yeah,
just give us a quick kind of 30-second intro into Gumloop so we warm up the room and then
totally.
introduce the new node.
Yeah. So Gumloop, yeah, as I mentioned, let me just kind of share. Can I send a request to share my screen?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. Okay, let me grab. Okay. So I'm going to show you mainly the AI web research, but what Gumloop does in general is lets you automate any kind of workflow with AI. So these are all examples that you can actually play around with live, right? So let's imagine the sales lead scoring. You can go scrape websites, LinkedIn, do things like grab a PDF, send it to Google Sheet, these kinds of AI type tasks. But Michael was specifically interested for your team to do more of a workflow where we research information about specific companies, right? So he gave me kind of a list of companies, and you could imagine that you are either an investor and you get pitched all these companies, and there's a set amount of data you want to extract for those companies, and maybe create like a one-page report, right? So you want to get a list of maybe you get pitched companies, maybe you get deal flow from somebody else, and you want to be able to create a workflow where any company you put in and you get a set amount of information returned to you that gets into your workflow. It might be enriching your CRM, might be creating that report, whatever it is. So as I'm building this, I'm also going to give you the basics of Gumloop. This is where the chat, feel free to ask questions. I always have the chat up and kind of looking at them. Michael, if I miss anything, please let me know. But I'm here in Gumloop. This is our canvas. This is where you build your workflows, right? Workflows are composed of nodes. Those are the steps you want your automation to do. Now, what I got a little Google sheet here that I built a moment ago that has a list of companies. That's where we're going to get to. We're going to imagine that we want to do some reporting on these companies. But first, let's kind of build out our flow. Let's see what we want to do with these companies. These are provided by Michael. So if there's some that you want to kind of learn about, let me know in the chat. These, I think, are electric vehicle companies, correct?
Correct. So just for a little bit of context, the web research node is so fascinating. I think it's a little counterintuitive of how it works because there is a little bit of agent workflow in there. And the context here is you're a US investor and you're just starting to see European deal flow for electric vehicles. And you're like, what do I not know about the geographic market and the specificity from these companies?
Yeah. See, Michael knows more about this use case than I do. He should be the one presenting. I just have the infrastructure here. So we're going to start. I'm going to be building. There's a lot of like, I'm happy to go more in depth. So I'm going to start with an input node, which is just our starting point. Like, what company do we want to research? And we'll eventually connect that to this right here. So let me just take Electra. That's going to be our default value, what we're going to test our flow with. I'm going to call this company name. And then you have a list of steps. You have hundreds of different nodes that you can pick from. Some leveraging AI, Ask AI, web scraping. Maybe you want to go to their website, find information about it. You want to read a file. Mainly what Michael wanted to show you all and thought was interesting to you is our AI web research node. So this is an agent-like node. What that means is it has no inputs and no outputs. You have to define what it is that you want to return. So a good example, I'm looking at Michael's example here. You want to say, okay, given a company name, this is a structure that I recommend. Given X, return Y. So, return the total amount raised, and then the funding round. And then we can even specify seed, Series A, Series B, etc. Then maybe company headquarter country where the company is headquartered, the country where the company is headquartered. So what this does, we're kind of structuring an output. We're saying, hey, given X, return these outputs. So I'm going to generate inputs and outputs. Now it's reading your prompt and then adjusting what the node does in the background. So you're going to see in a second, company name appears as an input, and then everything you've put in the prompt appears as an output. So we have total amount raised, funding round, headquarters country, and then two standard outputs, which are citations, where the information is coming from, and the reasoning, a little bit about how it got there. So now we can connect these two nodes together to say, take whatever is in here and go ahead and have that as company name. Now, what does this node do? It's very nebulous so far. This actually goes out to the web and looks for information that's relevant to the query that you just put in. So it is dynamically going to the web as it is today to find this information and give you a structured output. So the use case Michael presented me, I'm going to run this. It could run up to 2 minutes just because it has to go out, find the information, summarize it, and run it. While that's happening, I'm going to take questions and talk a little bit about, how Michael thought about this. You can then have multiple, if you have a report that has a certain structure, first you want the founder background, then you want a company background, competitor intel. You can chain these together to run 4 or 5 AI web research nodes, and then combine all of that content together to write a one-page report, right? With references and where it's getting the information, such that you can quickly, for any company, get context, right? It's kind of like this mini analyst that runs in the background whenever you're submitting information. So it's going to take about another minute.
Yeah, as that's running, could you just share Gummy a little bit? People are like, "What's that in the
Oh,
corner?" And Gummy is totally an underrated part of the platform. So tell us
yeah.
and show us what Gummy is as that's loading.
So Gummy is our kind of AI helper. It's not a third party. We built this fully from scratch. And Gummy understands what you're building and understands, Gumloop in general very deeply, right? So what does this flow do? It's going to go ahead and look at what it is that you do and kind of return that information, right? And so here it takes the flow starts with an input. This company name is passed. When complete, it'll return structured data in these nodes. And then it's starting kind of you if you turn on the beta, it can recommend nodes. So let's say I want to send this information to an email in an email. So it's understanding your flow, your intent, and it's recommending what you can do next. There we go. Gmail sender, right? Combined text. So Gmail sender is what I would use to go ahead and send this output if I wanted to, if I wanted to send a report. Um, are you a Gummy user, Michael?
Yes, I love Gummy. I was using your RAG on the documentation. So for people who don't know, they have a great way to summarize their docs. And then Gummy's been the thing that's been working for especially debugging. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I got this error. How might I fix it?
Yeah. Okay, let's look. It's still running, so it's going to take a little while to run here. Um,
Yeah, so as that's running, we have another question in chat too, from Daniel asking, is this JSON like a similar platform? Can we edit the code or is it fully node-based? So you could talk a little bit about how that customization works with Gumloop.
so when you say, oh, you want to edit the underlying code of the node?
Feel free to unmute Daniel and clarify the question.
Yeah, so with other workflows, sometimes I can just bring in JSON directly and then edit from that. Is that what's happening sort of behind the scenes here, or is it only, what you see is what you get with the Node GUI?
No. So you, if the question is, can I run this in my code once I've built a GUI? The answer is yes. Can I input JSON as a starting point? Yes. Can you run code in the platform? Yes, but you can't export the flow as code, if that makes sense, and then edit it on your own. Does that answer your question, Daniel?
Yeah, sounds good. So you could take JSON from somewhere else and it would adapt for Gumloop. Is that what
Yeah.
I'm
So
hearing?
you can have a JSON reader if you're inputting JSON as a starting point. Also, if you have inputs, right? So if you have 6 inputs and you want to run a webhook or run like, hey, take, from this other platform and send it over to Gumloop as inputs in a JSON and then run the rest of the flow, we do have an SDK to do that. Cool.
Awesome. And we got another question incoming from Anu asking about what foundation models you all use under the hood. So I don't know what you can share about web search because I know that's a closed loop, but just showing what customization does exist and yeah, for the models.
Yes. So AI web research is a mix of proprietary and third party, right? That we've kind of made into this AI web research, right? So that one you cannot select the model. However, okay, this is completed. I'll get to that in a moment. However, we have about 16 different ways of leveraging AI in a node basis that I can talk a little bit. So here, in most of these, you can select the model. And what the differentiation of all of these is, when you go to ChatGPT and you're like, hey, can you give me one category for this? Or, can you output one piece of information? These are nodes that are custom built to do that. And in all of these, you can pick the model. So a good example is, let's say you have a PDF. You can read the PDF with Gumloop and then say, I want to extract the amount, the vendor. So this is kind of a structured AI node. You pass in your text or what your PDF analyzer, and then this will output that information. And you'll notice here at the bottom, you can select which model you want to use. So this is using our own credentials. So if you don't have API keys for Claude or for everything, you can use ours. And if you have your own, you can also pass those in, and that'll reduce the credit cost of every flow. Make sense? So quickly, I want to talk about the results of the Ask AI. Oh, great, Daniel. Let me answer your question about credit usage in a second. So here we now have the output. So headquartered in France, 600 million raised, citations, and it gives you the URL of where it's pulling that information. And it's also telling you like what a summary of that is. So that's doing that dynamically. So if we were to change the input, so I can actually connect it to this node really quickly. So let's imagine we do this. like that. I'm not going to run it for all 6 of these, but we can really easily do a new subflow, get companies. I'm going to connect this to, let's call this, whoops, sorry about that. EV companies I want to analyze. Let's do Sheets. We're reading Google Sheets. You can also do an interface where you can input manually this information, like the company name, and it returns that data. So let me just pull 2 of these. So we're not pulling everything. And now let's call this do research. So this is always going to pull these 2 companies. And now I can kind of connect what I just built, the do research flow, like that. That goes into loop mode. So it's going to loop over every option here. I know this is a lot, of information. So now it's going to run over every single item in that sheet. And now you could imagine the workflow being built, right? If you had 100 companies you wanted to complete, let's run that. It's going to take a little while. We save and run. So what is it doing here? It's reading Google Sheets, right? Then it's doing the research. It's processing, doing this subflow, and it's doing the research, and it should output those 2 things. But it's still running, so let's give it a moment. Still processing. Okay, it's going to take about 3 to 4 minutes. Yeah, we need a mascot for Gummy. We're like debating whether it needs to be like a little orb, or things like that. So question from Daniel around credit use. So if we go to Ask AI here, depending expert is 30 credits, 20 credits for advanced, 2 for standard, 1 if you have your own API key. And we have like little tags for the model. And a starter plan at Gumloop is about 35,000 credits. So you can imagine, I think it's a third of a penny per credit. So something like this costs you about 6 cents, right, to do that output. Does that make sense? Okay, let's see where this is at. Still running. Give it a moment.
Could you explain that? Thanks for clarifying the credits too. And I think the one of the biggest optionalities too in Gumloop is being able to switch out to your own API. So you can actually really keep credits as low as possible for automations if that is something that you're monitoring. So appreciate you sharing the credits. Can you talk a little bit more as this is running? What are some upper limits of the web research node? So just for example, is there a best practice for how many inputs and outputs? So like is 5 or 6 different outputs too many for the web research node? Or like I've been trying to max out on like 10 or 12 and it still works, but I'm a little bit intimidated of running that on like 100 workflow, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are better probably at knowing those limitations of the. I would say in general, AI is better when the task you are asking it to do is limited in scope. So, for instance, if you are asking it, "Hey, I want to grab information about this company, then I want information about the founders," I would recommend doing that in 2 different web research nodes. And the reason is that it's going to scour the web specifically for your request around the founders differently than it would for the company, right? Uh, uh, um, so that is what the kind of recommendation I have. If you ask it for 12 different outputs that are like, in my experience, if I asked it like, give me the company funding and then give me a list of executives, ideally those would be 2 different things, right? So give me a list of executives and give me the company background. I would do that in 2 different steps. And always check, like all AI, always check the output. It is only as good as the information it finds online, and that's not always correct. Okay. Does that make sense, Michael? Is that what you've seen as well?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. So now we've seen the output. So it's run for each one of those. I can view the underlying runs. That's the one we just saw, like it reran because we used the same one. So let me go back. I go this one, you run. and Series D in Portugal raised 266 million. That's for PowerDot. So a new ask a great question. Is there a way to drop in an example one page or to use a template for your output? Yes. So this is actually like a really, really good question. So as you're building out your flow, let's imagine you have a PDF that you like as a template, right? So let's imagine I don't have one. Let me see if I even have a PDF file. What is this? I don't want to. Okay, I have an Airbnb receipt. Maybe that's not the best, but I can upload a PDF or read it and then have AI write me a report and provide as context that PDF, provide the research it's doing, and ask it to write a one-page report. So generate a one-page report with, summarizing this company's information, use as template the provided PDF. That's one way. Another way that you can do to generate a really nice report is, create, you can even explicitly say what you want in the report. So create a 3-section PDF starting with the founder's background, then the company details, output the report as HTML, etc., and then have that as an email. So from here, it's just a question of like wiring all this together. So you take all of these, put it into a combined text node, pull all that together, send it over to the AI. If we have like 5 minutes, Michael, I'm happy to like build out an example. I just don't have like the pieces to do it.
Totally
Do you
okay. I
have
think
one that you would want to show? Do you have like a report that is an example of? I don't want to put you on the spot.
yeah, I can do a demo at the end. I want to
Yeah.
make sure you got the spotlight and we got what's on your screen. I'm happy to share one at the end. I think one question too that I think gets asked is as you can create subflows within this, when is a good mental model for saying, well, now we have these 3 nodes on the canvas, we have the PDF reader, we have Ask AI to synthesize these. When do you start thinking about nesting it as a subflow
Yeah.
versus just keeping it the high level canvas?
Great question. So I would say I like to have like kind of like coding, right? When your function gets too unwieldy, you want to split it into separate functions. Think of subflows as functions. You have inputs and then you have outputs. So a good example is if I want this to be a do research node, and then I have another node that is create report, those should be separate kind of flows. So a good example is let's say here, I can just do output the information that I'm grabbing, right? So amount raised, funding round. Let's just do these two as an example. Let's save that. If I go back to get companies, we have those two outputs. Now I could have another one that is like write report. And what's great about this is then I could have in multiple inputs, right? So I can have a kind of, funding round, but I could also have kind of maybe LinkedIn profiles that I've pulled from other nodes. So I always recommend to have the narrowest possible node flows with inputs and outputs, so you can then chain them together and create more of a master flow, exactly like as you do in code, where your code is just like calling a bunch of different functions and passing inputs and outputs between them. Makes it easier to debug, makes it easier to, if there's an error, to either continue running or debug that error. And the way gumloop is built, once you build a subflow, it becomes reusable within the workbook, but also across the workbook. So if you want to use what you've built in another flow, you can do that as well. So it's very much like programming. Our founders are developers, as you can imagine, who think of us non-developers a lot and who like us and build stuff for us.
Amazing. We've got another question from the chat from Craig. How do these flows get stored and organized? Can you kind of go above the canvas just so we can understand,
Yeah.
yeah, what's happening?
So very similar. You have your kind of list of flows, right? We take a title, we automatically give you a little description. This is AI generated, read data from Google Sheet to conduct research on EV companies efficiently. If you get into a more complex workspace, right, where you're collaborating with your team, this is my little personal workspace where I do demos out of. If you go to our marketing, you organize it into folders, right? And you're able to organize your flows like that. And you could also see the history of anything that's run to kind of get a sense of how your flows are doing. And then you could filter down either by trigger, things that have failed, when it was run, to kind of understand what's going on.
Awesome. So I know you've been on the platform for 25 minutes straight. It's so fun to talk and build. I think that's one of the biggest unlocks for me using Gumloop too is literally while having intro calls with people, I'll just be building a Gumloop in the background to show them versus just talk about it. So I think outside of everything you've demoed on the platform, is there anything else you would share as someone who's coming from a non-technical background but has technical workflows that might go, wow, this might be a little bit too intimidating because it seems like it's built from a developer's perspective. Like anything from your perspective that you've seen using Gumloop or anything you just want to share that's not the Canvas tool specific, but just like when thinking about using this as a tool?
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it, the blank canvas is a real problem that we have as a business, right? It's very intimidating. So I always recommend start with an input node, go from there. And that's actually like the best way to build. And it's also the best way to learn, right? We have cohorts, which is a great way to learn Gumloop. We have YouTube videos. We're building university as we speak. Reach out to Michael if you have questions. He's a pro. And I think kind of bite sized is the way to go. Build small flows, simple flows. Don't try to do too much. And if you're like, what could I do with Gumloop? Templates are a really good example of what you want to do. But start maybe with there was a few examples in the chat. Web AI research node, Ask AI research node, Ask AI node, read a Google Sheet, you know, get some background on those people, do some enrichment. Those are easy flows to start with.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for that answer and for that demo. Where can people best follow up with you and Gumloop? I know you guys are cross-platform, but for like the cohorts, for example, do you drop those on X? You drop them on LinkedIn? Where can people follow up with you?
Yeah. So we are a very small but mighty team. If you want to join a cohort, I think it's oh, do we not have it on the page? I thought we had it on right here. I think we have it in resources. Uh somewhere here. I should know. One second. Resources. I think on
Where,
the forum, sorry. And then you can
okay,
have Slack
nice.
educational cohort. There we go. I'll send the drop. This is where we recommend if you want to keep learning Gumloop. But we also have a YouTube channel. We're on X, we're on LinkedIn, we're all those places. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. I know that was a whirlwind. I think it just speaks to the potential of what people can use by using Gumloop. So I want to be mindful of your time and everyone else's time. If everyone has to hop, feel free to drop. Aaron, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes with us and giving us this was a master class crash course on everything Gumloop and web research node related. So thanks for making the time.
Yeah. Always happy. Thank you for having me.